Hey y'all, it's Ashley Bookishram and I'm back with another video. As you can see from the title of this video, I am here to talk about the best and the worst books of 2021 so far. So typically everyone's doing the mid-year book freakout tag. That title, goodness gracious, that title, it's not fun. It's not a fun title to work through, but I opted not to do it this year. I did it last year. I enjoyed it, but this year I'm kind of like, don't really feel like doing it. So instead of doing that, I'm going to do the best and the worst books of 2021 so far, because this list could possibly change in December of this year. I think that some of the books that are on here that are the worst titles probably won't, but I do know that my best list can change. If you see a lot of glitter everywhere, which I don't know if you can see it through, my camera lens, we want it to be sparkly today. When I say we, I mean me. I want it to sparkle up my life today. So let's go ahead and jump in. I promise this is not going to be too long, especially when I get to the worst list. I don't want to, I don't want to be extra, but I am extra. Okay, so let's start this video off on a positive note. As you all know, I read a little bit of everything, or I try to. I know I just made that diversity video and there are some areas where I need work, but on this best list, you're gonna see a mix of prose, comics, and manga. Same thing even with the worst list. You're gonna see a mix of prose, manga, and comics, because that's just the way that I operate. So let's go ahead and start with my first pick. These are not in any order. There's 10 titles. It's not like number one is the best of the best. Like, I'm not doing that until the end of the year, because making the list in like numerical order of like the best of the best of the best is extremely stressful, and I wasn't going to do that to myself today. So the first one that we have here is Joker, and I feel like I talk about this a lot on this channel because Joker is one of the best ongoing series right now in the comic book industry. I don't care what anybody says. I feel validated because one of the biggest comic book creators on YouTube just made a video within the past few days that was like, this is the best Joker story ever. So I feel extremely validated in that. But this is the Joker series that follows the Joker War. This is done by James Tynion IV, who I am like madly in love with. If he ever sees this video, just know I appreciate you so much as a comic creator, and he's doing his damn thing with this series. Okay, he is amazing. So I know a lot of people are upset about the fact that this is not technically a Joker book, meaning that it's not told from the perspective of Joker. But honestly, I mean, what Tynion does with this is he creates such a huge presence of Joker through the perspective of Commissioner Gordon that you can't help but feel like it is a Joker book. So it follows Commissioner Gordon right after the effects of the Joker War, and there's been an attack on Arkham Asylum, and it looks very reminiscent of something that Joker would do, but as you find out later on, Joker has nothing to do with it. So we have kind of that plot line going, and then we also find out that Commissioner Gordon has been kind of like reached out to by these group of individuals who basically are giving him an unlimited source of money to not bring the Joker in, but kill him. And they feel like they can't go to the police because Joker has been arrested and locked up so many times that no one trusts for him to be in jail. At this point, he just needs to be killed because he's that much of a problem. So I won't say much more than that. If you are not a huge comic fan, or if you're looking for a place to start, there are some kind of tie-ins to Joker War, but even I have not read all of the stuff that leads up to Joker War and Joker War itself, and I can still appreciate this book. It is so brilliant. It is jaw-dropping. Every single issue, every issue that has dropped so far has been a hit. A hit. And that says a lot in the comic book world. So, like I said, if you haven't heard of Joker, I need you to go ahead and pick this one up. The next book that I have on this list is one that I talked about a lot this year, and that is Ace: What Asexuality Reveals About Desire, Society, and the Meaning of Sex by Angela Chen. And I will say that going into this book, I don't think I had a strong grasp of asexuality and how asexuality is a spectrum. And it taught me so much more about the difference between sexual attraction and sexual drive. And I think that people quite often get those two mixed up, that if you're asexual, you don't have any sexual drive, which is not true. I think reading this book also brought a lot of introspection. So it explained a lot about myself and certain situations that I've been in, and it made me feel very seen. And I'm not sure where I would possibly fit on the spectrum, or if I even do fit on the spectrum, but it's made me kind of reconsider some things and think about myself in a lot of ways. And I think that Angela Chen writes this book in a way that makes understanding asexuality extremely accessible, and she breaks it down into so many different categories of what it means to be asexual and a man, what it means to be asexual and be specifically like Black, especially since a lot of men and women in the Black community are over sexualized, or even what it means to be asexual and disabled. So there's a lot of crossroads that she talks about, basically looking at asexuality in the lens of intersectionality, and I really appreciated this. I have been pushing this book on every single person. So if you have not read Ace, it is a great nonfiction book. I'm glad that I stumbled upon it. I'm glad that I read it. I devoured it. And honestly, I still need to buy a physical copy of it because I want to go back through and I want to read it and I want to annotate it, because there was so much that was discussed in this book, and there's so much that I think I want to go back and like really revisit and really dissect and really truly understand. The next one on my list is Your Lie in April, and I'm not going to include a specific volume because every single volume that I read so far, which has been 5 volumes, they've been 5-star reads. And Your Lie in April probably connects with me a lot because I am a classically trained pianist. I think I say this every time I talk about Your Lie in April, but it's important for me to mention that because this holds a very special place in my heart, because it does discuss what it's like to be a musician and then you step away and you never truly lose that connection with music or your instrument. It's like the two of you are always going to be bound together some way, somehow. And in this, our main character, he was a pianist. He was trained strictly, and it was abusive, by his mother, and he lost passion for it when his mother died. I don't think he truly knew how to feel, or even knew like what his relationship with the piano should be. And you know, he has 2 great friends, and he meets this young girl who's a violinist, and she encourages him to step back into the music, and she tells him, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. And that's the one thing I think, especially in being a classically trained pianist, is that I think sometimes you itch to reach for perfection when it's not about being perfect. It's about feeling the music, becoming one with the music, becoming one with your instrument, and really just letting that passion course through your body. I wish it was something that I could literally put into words, but it's not. It's a very unique feeling and a very unique experience that is difficult to put into words. And every time they play like a classical piece, the mangaka makes sure that they actually have it, like the title of it, somewhere on page, that way you could listen to it. So a lot of the times when I'm reading this manga, I actually listen to the classical piece while I'm reading it, and honestly it just makes my emotions 10 times more heightened. And I feel like this is going to be really sad. I think most people who have seen me read this have let me know, like, this is a tearjerker, and I can already see how it's going to be a tearjerker, especially with our other heroine, who may have some issues going on, and you kind of see that early on, probably like volume 2 or 3-ish, and I just don't think it's going to end well. So I'm bracing myself. But if you haven't read Your Lie in April, or if you haven't watched the anime, I definitely recommend checking out both. All right, so the next one that I have is also a comic, and it's Thor, God of Thunder, issue number 6 by Jason Aaron. And okay, the reason why I think I love this one is because this definitely is a very, very interesting look into the role I think that religion may have played in Jason Aaron's life. This is definitely his commentary on religion as probably someone who is either agnostic or atheist, and that's me making assumptions. I don't know for a fact that he is, but just the nature of this is definitely along those lines, where you have this alien species and this man and his wife clearly are in a very like destitute situation, no food, no water, and she keeps praying to the gods, and he's like, why do you keep doing this? And she was like, they will bless us eventually, you know. And it starts off actually with his mother, who's doing the same thing, and then something bad happens to her. His wife does the same thing, and bad things end up happening to her, his kids, and you really see him struggle with this whole idea of faith. And it's really a brief look into Noel's origin story, which is intriguing because Marvel just finished up that Huge King in Black event, which definitely looks at the relationship between Noel and Venom and the symbiotes and all that good stuff. So I did not expect this to be such a heavy commentary type of single issue comic, but it was. And because he made so much commentary about the state of religion and how sometimes religion can make you feel helpless or can let you down in some ways, it was brilliantly done. I just have to commend the man for the way that he made the story progress, even though this was kind of like an unforeseen origin story of a huge villain within the Marvel universe. So it was just done very well. I don't know if anyone would necessarily just want to pick up this issue. I was reading it because I'm trying to catch up with some stuff that happened before King in Black. I'm so far behind on that, but it really, really is a great single issue comic. The next one that I have on this list is The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna. This is a tough book. I've talked a lot about this book because of the fact that there's been a lot of conversations about content warnings and, you know, trigger warnings and stuff of that nature. And quite honestly, it definitely will not prepare you for this. I thought that this had a content warning in it, y'all. Maybe it doesn't. Or maybe she just said that somewhere else. I don't know. Maybe either way, she told us this was going to be violent. This is heavily based on the wars that happened in Sierra Leone that she witnessed as a child. And it's about these young women who are tested essentially for purity. If your blood runs red, you're pure, and if it runs gold, you're destined for death. The sheer amount of bodily harm and injury that happens within like the first 15% of this book is tough. It is tough. I remember getting 15% and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And I read this in February of this year with 2 other very, very difficult books, which was the dumbest thing I could have done in a million years. But I think that this was just done well. It was not an easy read. The reveals were very, very intriguing. I think there was some pacing issues in it, but this was a really, really great book. And it was one that I had been anticipating for a very, very long time. And I'm glad to have picked it up. I need to do a reread of it already, but I have to mentally prepare myself for this one. Like going in and knowing how graphic and gritty this book is. Man, oh man, oh man. If you haven't read The Gilded Ones, just definitely be prepared for that. And even knowing that going into this book, I won't say it for everyone, but I don't know if it will necessarily truly prepare you to see what the main character goes through over and over and over and over again, because it didn't prepare me to know that it was going to be extremely violent. So yes, The Gilded Ones. I would be foolish to make this list and not include this book. Of course I'm going to include this book. Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston is one of the most iconic middle grade books of 2021 and shall remain so for the rest of the year. You will see this book again on my favorites of 2021. Now, where it will fit into the list, I'm not sure yet, but it definitely is going to be one of my top books of 2021. I don't know if you have or have not read this book yet, but if you haven't, read it. This is the Black girl magic that I wish I had growing up. This is the story that I needed growing up. It's about this young girl by the name of Amari, and her brother disappears. And the police, of course, show no interest. Amari is determined to find her brother. She eventually figures out that there's some magical school. She may have some magic abilities, and she goes there in hopes of finding answers about her brother. The twists and turns in this book, wild. I love a book that leads me down a path and I'm like, oh, I can't believe I already figured this out. And then you turn two pages later and you're like, wait, hold up. But you set this up and this was supposed to happen and then this happened, and this was just a brilliant story. It was so good. This is the story that I will pass on to my daughter because it's just so great. The black joy, the magic, the boarding school. It's just, oh, I love this book. And I genuinely wish I would have had this book growing up. I'm low-key jealous of the kids that grow up nowadays because I feel like the selection of books that they get is just like a tad bit better than what I had when I was a kid. Don't get me wrong, publishing can still do a heck of a lot. They have a lot of work to do. But there are some gems that come out now that are great books to carry on as legacies that I think are going to age very, very well. And Amari and the Night Brothers is a book that's going to age well. I'm so very happy for B.B. Alston. This has got to be such a huge accomplishment for him. He put this story out into the world, and I'm so glad that he did. And I cannot wait to get my hands on the second book. I wish he would just hurry up and make this happen. But I'm going to be patient. I'm going to be patient. The next one that I have is The Awakening of Malcolm X. And this was one of the first arcs that I read this year. I finished this one in January. And it is a book that focuses on Malcolm X's time while he's in prison. So his daughter actually has written a couple of books in which she follows the life of her mother and the life of her father. And this one she wrote with Tiffany D. Jackson, and it, you know, looks at how he goes from one lifestyle just kind of all over the place to finally jumping in and getting his knees deep into the Nation of Islam. There were some very, very powerful quotes in this one, and there was a lot of stuff about Malcolm X that I didn't know. Like, I didn't know that he actually was on the debate team in prison, and one of the things I think that was such a huge impression on him on being that the debate team was that he had studied and worked so hard. Like, he began to really hone in on the fact that reading was the way to educate yourself, to make yourself better. And when he got on that debate team, it was tough because the more intelligent he proved himself to be, the more intimidated white people became and wanted to continue to hold him back. And that really resonated with me. And that's not all that the book is about, but that is a part of this book that really, really stood out to me because I know that feeling. I know that feeling all too well. and it really just jumped out on me. But it includes so much more than that. It's also told a little bit in flashbacks, so you get some bits and pieces of like his childhood, and it's mixed in with how he goes through his awakening process. Is a very interesting writing style, because it's almost like his past, like his mother and his father and some of his siblings, in the way that the flashbacks happen. They're telling him like, wake up, Malcolm, like wake up, it's time to see the world for what it is. It's time to see what it's truly like to be a black man or a black woman in this world. You know, you've got to open up your eyes. You can't be blinded anymore. And I think also what was so good about this is that, you know, Malcolm X, of course, did fall out with the Nation of Islam, and this book, at kind of towards like the end of it, touched on some later issues that Malcolm could possibly have with the Nation of Islam, and it came from another inmate, which I thought was intriguing. So this inmate was really heavily saying how he did not feel comfortable with one person kind of leading a religious movement the way that the leader of the Nation of Islam was at the time. And forgive me because I can't, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I don't know why that was about to slip my mind. He did not feel comfortable with the way that was happening, and he kind of let Malcolm know, which gave a clear indication that Malcolm was going to later have issues. So I'm glad that Ilyasah and Tiffany D. Jackson decided to weave that into the story, because it would play a huge role later on, and I'm hoping that she writes that final segment of his life, and you know, it comes out sometime soon. But if you haven't checked out The Awakening of Malcolm X, I highly recommend that one. So the next one that I have is Let Me Free You, and this is by Alexandria House. This is part of the McLean Brothers series, which I finished the series this year. I've done a review on the entire series on her Black Love channel, which we're gonna get the ball rolling on that soon. It's just been a lot for both me and Deidre, so I will link that review in the card symbol above. And I really appreciated this one because it was the soulmate vibe. Not saying that the other brothers didn't have really solid relationships, that, you know, I'm a huge fan of all of their relationships. I love their love because it's the best way that I know how to put it. But I really appreciated this one because it was such a soulful thing. This wasn't just like a physical attraction. They had a connection that was just so deep, and maybe I think I connected with that because, you know, when I do find, or when I do come across, because, you know, I'm gonna be like, I'm not actively looking, when I do come across that person that will be my lifelong partner, that's the type of connection that I want, that soul to soul connection. Of course, you know, you have the physical attraction and you have, you know, the emotional attraction and that connection, but that soul tie, man, it's a beautiful thing. And I think that Alexandria House was really able to capture this well, and just the reverence that was present for Black women. You know, Black women just are beautiful creatures. They're amazing humans, and a lot of times Black women just don't get the respect and honor and the love that they deserve. And in this book, it happened, and it was beautiful to watch and unfold. So if you haven't read the McLean Brothers series, I don't know what you're doing with your life, to be quite honest. Okay, so the ninth one that I have on this list is Fighting Words by Kimberly Brew Baker Bradley. Those two names always get me. Try saying that 100 times fast. But this is definitely different than what I typically expect from her. And oh man, this is a tough book, okay? This is not an easy read. It deals with two sisters who are put into a foster home with a woman by the name of Francine, and they have gone through some seriously like traumatic events. I mean, it took me a long time to write the review that I did on Goodreads because I needed to process exactly what these girls had been through. And it's told from the perspective of Della, who is a younger sister. And she wants to use her voice in some aspects when the pieces of the puzzle are put together. And she wants to protect her older sister. Her older sister wants to protect her. And it's sad because they have this great bond, but they have to learn that sometimes it's best for someone else to come in and take care of you, especially because they're still kids. But they had grown up in such a crazy situation with, you know, a parent in prison, an absent parent, and then someone coming in and there being, you know, sexual assault, sexual violence, and they were all that they had. And then here comes Francine, who's a very prickly foster parent, but I appreciated that in terms of character development, because I think that she needed to be to match the personalities of the girls. But their journey to healing is not an easy journey to read about. And there are a lot of people who feel like, oh, this book is too much and this is not appropriate for middle school. It is. It is written in graphic ways, but also in a way that I think is appropriate for a middle grade audience, and a book that's very much needed. And I know that some people feel like, oh, Francine's not a realistic foster parent. She is. I think there are foster parents out there who really do care, and she fought tooth and nail against the state for those girls. And you know, nothing was ever perfect, but they got where they needed to be. And I just really appreciated this book. Definitely one of the best middle grades that I have read outside of Amari and the Night Brothers. That, oh man, yeah, Fighting Words was just really good. Okay, and the last best book that I have on my list so far is going to be How to Trap a Tiger, and this is by Tay Keller. This was really good. This was a book that taught me a little bit about Korean myth and lore, and this book hurt my feelings. You know, a lot of the books on here that I enjoy, everyone knows this about me at this point. If you've been following this channel, you know that books that hurt my feelings, make me sad, or just like kind of put me down in the dumps, usually are the best books, because I feel like I just have this emotional connection to them that's a little bit different, and I appreciate them on a different level than I do with some other books. Not to say that books that are happy don't make me feel happy, or that I don't love them, but those books that kind of tug at my heartstrings usually do make my best of the best list whenever we start looking at what I've read for the entirety of the year. So yeah, this is definitely about family dynamic and dealing with some difficult situations with family members, some heartbreaking situations. We have two sisters and their mom who moved in with their grandmother, and their grandmother is clearly not doing too well. And our main character, which don't ask me names, y'all, just don't, you know, I can't remember names to save my life. She copes with the issues that are going on through some mythological things, and I don't want to delve too deep into it because I don't want to spoil it, but it was sad. It was really sad. This won the Newbery Award, I believe, for 2020, I believe. Yeah, this one won the Newbery Award for 2020, which rightfully so, and it definitely is an exploration of self. It is an exploration of family, where we've come from, where we're going, and I think that it comes across that way and is done so well because at the time Tay Keller was coming into terms with her own Korean heritage, and you can see that on page. So I appreciate that too. I know a lot of writers do write from their life experiences, or in some ways that may be influenced by something that they love, they've heard, or whatever. But you can clearly see that whatever she was going through in terms of exploring her own self-identity, it translated perfectly on page. And yeah, I definitely appreciated that one. All right, y'all, so here we are at everyone's favorite part, the worst books, because it's like spilling tea. Everybody loves to sip their tea in the booktube community, but some of these shouldn't be surprises because some of these I've actually ranted about. So, you know, the first one clearly on the list, Life After Death which is The Coldest Winter Ever, book number 2 by Sister Souljah, which should have stayed in the drafts, quite frankly. I mean, I don't know why we got this book. People were pissed about this book, rightfully so. It was a waste of like 10 hours of my life that I'll never get back. Well, truly not 10 hours, because you know I don't listen to audiobooks on 1.0 speed, but it's time in my life that I'm never gonna get back. And either way, that's aggravating. But I don't need to say much more about this book. I don't even want to give it the time of day, because at the end of the day, I did a full non-spoiler rant review of why this book should have stayed in the drafts and why I can't believe that I wasted my time reading it and was so pissed and disappointed, especially when I think The Coldest Winter Ever has played such a pivotal role in the Black community, especially in the subgenre of urban fiction or street lit, whatever your term preference is. But yes, but I'll make sure I leave that linked in the card symbol above if you feel so inclined to check it out. The next one that I have on this list is Delaney's Desert Chic by Brenda Jackson. Now, this is interesting because I do want to continue the series, but this was not it for me. I think I gave this book 2 stars when I read it, and honestly, it does not hold up well. I think this book was published in like 2002 is when it was published, and you can tell it was published in 2002. There's a lot of stuff that now in 2021 it doesn't hold up well. Doesn't mean that I don't want to finish the series, but there was a specific scene where there was some non-consent going on, and it just like never was addressed. And it was weird because he did this thing, she was sleeping, she wakes up, and then like we just never talk about that thing, and it made me extremely uncomfortable because that is non-consensual. So that's a problem. That's a huge problem. But I've read other Brenda Jackson stuff. She's a brilliant writer. She is a queen when it comes to being a Black romance writer, and I will always respect her for that. This just was not my personal cup of tea, and it just hasn't aged well, but it definitely, so far, this is one of the worst books that I have read in 2021. The next one that I have is Curse of the Arctic Star, and this is a new entry into, I think it's called the Nancy Drew Diaries, and I can't remember why I read this. I think maybe it was just an audiobook that was available. I'll read it type of situation. I think that's what happened, but it was not good at all. I think that it was not, first of all, the writing wasn't good. I don't think that the pacing and the plotting were done very good. As a matter of fact, you know, of course, Nancy Drew was just mysteries. You expect a certain type of flow, regardless of age categorization. You expect a certain kind of like flow with mysteries, but with this one, it was like Nancy wasn't even invested in the mystery herself. Honestly, she would have never figured anything out had everything not been like put in her lap. And it was weird. It was just a weird thing. Like, you think it's going to be interesting because it takes place on this cruise ship, and I thought like, okay, this could be really cool, but the way that the clues were introduced was extremely random. There were so many suspects, but by the time we get to that conclusion, it's like, well, Nancy, how did you even figure this out, honey? Because none of this makes sense. There's no way that you could have put 2 and 2 together. It just, all of it was way too convenient, and too much was introduced. The plot was all over the place, and then there was the blurring of the age categorizations. I couldn't tell you really, but I knew I wasn't the target audience. I'm an adult, but there was some like things that were happening where I was like, is this like lower YA or is this like upper middle grade? But then the writing style didn't make it feel, it was just weird. It was I didn't like it. I just didn't like it at all. Okay, so the next title that we have is Ties That Tether by Jani Ikaro. Okay, so this already got like a whole bunch of controversial reviews, like a lot. A whole lot of controversial reviews, and I can see both sides of the coin. I did not really end up liking this book. It wasn't a horrible book, but it wasn't a good book either. It was just kind of and my main hiccup with it is that I think that there was no chemistry between the main characters at all. And if you know me, I am not a huge fan of any type of romance where the chemistry is not written well. So when chemistry is not written well between two characters in a romance, it, for me personally, is hard to become invested in their journey, in their romance. I'm not rooting for them. If I'm not rooting for them, it doesn't serve its purpose. You know what I'm saying? So with this one, what I think was done well was creating this picture and this narrative of what it's like to date someone where you both come from two cultural, and not just talking about race here, but two extremely different cultural backgrounds where both families want you to stay true to your cultural traditions. And it's hard because you want to stay true to your cultural traditions, but you also want to stay true to your heart. And that's a difficult balance. And I've never been in that situation before, so I can't imagine how difficult that is for anybody. And it's done well in this, but outside of that, it really wasn't done well. And then the piece of this book that is a huge thing for a lot of people that they've discussed felt very unwarranted for me, and maybe because I had been through the experience that this character, not exactly, but the trauma that this character had been through. And I never got the purpose of it. I never understood why it was included in the book, and this just didn't hold over well for me. I wish I did enjoy it as much as I wanted to enjoy it, but it just didn't happen. The next one that I have is Brave Chef Brianna, and this was written by Sam Sykes, I believe. This starts off as a really, really interesting comic book, and it's about Brianna, who's competing with her brothers for her dad's like cooking industry. So he's making them go to different places. They have to start a restaurant, and whoever does the best, you know, basically gets to maintain his legacy. But what happens in this book is so disgusting. It's ridiculous. So Brianna goes to this monster city, and here goes a thing that doesn't make sense. There's like this dark cloud or like substance that follows her, and I don't know if it was because she suffered from like depression or anxiety, or if it was an indication that she was part monster. Like, none of that is ever explained, like ever. You never get any explanation, so that's a plot hole right there. Then on top of that, there are rules in the city where the monsters are not supposed to have like flour, sugar, butter, and there's something else, milk, I think is the fourth thing. They're not supposed to have any of those items. Clearly this is a cultural thing. There's a reason why they're not supposed to consume this stuff. But Brianna comes in and she feels like, I don't care about their cultural things that they may have going on. I'm gonna cook with those substances regardless of whatever cultural policies and rules that they have in place, which to me came as an indication of, oh, you know, if it's for our benefit, we can ignore other people's cultural traditions or values. And then the villain, of course, was of a darker complexion, and we get snippets of why she has so many issues, and it's because she's been treated violently by humans. She's been discriminated against by humans, and clearly she's dealing with a lot of trauma and a lot of issues related to humans, and yet and still Sam decides to paint her as the villain. I can't help but feeling some type of way about the way that he constructed this entire graphic novel, and it really pissed me off when I read it. So this definitely will stay on the list of worst books for 2021. You can expect to see this one again in December. I promise you'll see it, because there was so much underlying commentary there done by him that made me look at him twice. And if you didn't know, that's Diana Gabaldon's son. Oh, FYI. Unfortunately, to this list, I have to add Future State Suicide Squad. Horrible. I didn't even read the second issue of Future State Suicide Squad. This was just all over the place, y'all. I did not like this. It deals a lot with Earth 3 in the DC universe, and while that was interesting, I felt like there were a lot of plot holes. None of it made sense. I really don't know where, I think it's done by Robbie Thompson. I don't know where Robbie Thompson was deciding to take this story, and I just didn't like it, which probably explains why I wasn't a huge fan of Infinite Frontier Suicide Squad. And I read like 2 issues of it, and then I was like, I'll just wait for the trade. I'm not really going to pick this up issue by issue anymore. So yeah. Did not like this. I don't know if this will remain on the list for the rest of the year, but it's one that I didn't enjoy at all. Next on the list we have Missions in Love. Is it Missions in Love? Yes, it's Missions in Love, which is a manga that I was reading when Shay and Izzy and Tamika were doing the 30 and 30 for the manga, and I found this on KU and I was reading it, and it was cute because it's about this girl who writes these cell phone novels, which is really interesting. They're like stories and people can read them on their devices, and she does really, really well. But people always say like, oh, you know, she never has any romance, and she doesn't know how to write romance. She's never been in like a romantic relationship, so she enlists this guy to kind of help her figure that out so she can then write romance. And it was really, really cute until another individual confessed their love, and the individual was her cousin. Listen, if this was historical, I would have let it slide, okay? Because back then, everybody was marrying their cousin. First cousin, second cousin, get kissing cousin, ain't nobody cared. But no, not in present day. Like, no, this could have been a best friend, a neighbor, childhood friend, anybody else, but it was her cousin. And if you know me and incest just don't. Anything that has familial ties to it, if it's blood relations, I can't do it. I cannot do it. If it's blood relations, you can count me out. Don't believe me? You should see the tweets that I posted about my feelings about stuff like this. So literally, I read the first volume, loved it. For the second volume, I was like, bruh, of all the places we could have gone, why choose a dang on cousin? So I was not happy about that. And the last one that I have on this list is Scarred, which was one that I read for the historical romance readathon. And my task during the historical romance readathon was to read Black historical romances that feature 2 Black characters written by Black authors. So Black love historical romance, essentially. And I completed my task. Definitely completed my task. But I picked this one up because I was like, okay, this is a historical romance. It's written by Black author. This is Black love. There were so many issues with this book, and I still can't tell if this is supposed to be an inspirational historical romance. If it is, it would explain a lot. But there were abusive behaviors, especially parental abuse, that were justified through the use of religion, and that's a huge no-no for me. I don't do that. Abuse is abuse is abuse is abuse. I don't care if you're supposed to honor thy mother and thy father. At the end of the day, if your parent's abusive, they got to go. That's toxic. They need to be out of your life. You don't have to withstand abuse from anybody because you want to, what I feel like, is misquote scripture in order to serve a purpose behind someone staying in an abusive or toxic situation. And that hit home. It hit home for me in a lot of different ways. And I did not like, there was a couple elements of this book that I didn't like, but that one specifically bothered me because the toxic behavior of the mother put our heroine in a very, very dangerous and trauma-filled situation, and then that trauma is never really addressed, but it's insinuated. So I had a huge problem with it. All right, y'all, so those are my top best and worst books of 2021 so far. I hope you all have enjoyed. In the comments below, let me know what have been your best books and your worst books of this year so far. I have read over 200 books so far this year. I have been doing a horrible job of tracking because I've just been so busy, and honestly my reading has slowed down significantly, and I've been reading a lot more comics. It's been in a weird headspace since like April of this year, and it's carried into May and into June. Maybe things will be different in July, but according to Goodreads, outside of the books that I had, like the 15 books that I haven't read, I haven't marked as read on Goodreads, I've read about 230 books so far this year, so it's been a good reading month. I'm just kind of going with it as I please. Just go with the flow here. Yeah. So anyway, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the bell for notification. Looking for ways to support the channel, links will be down in the description box below. And as always, I'll be back with another video soon. Bye.